to the show, Jiu-Jitsu brown belt and OG old roller, Tom Corrie. Tom, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So excited to chat with you because you have an experience that is just super I would say rare. You started jiu-jitsu at age 65, and you're now, I think you just said 72.
That's correct.
And a brown belt. So kicking ass at a slightly youth impaired status, I would say.
As I say, I prefer well seasoned. I'm well seasoned.
I love it. Yeah, I got a little seasoning too. So there's a lot to this story that's pretty fascinating. I actually heard about you a long time ago. Somebody sent me a video long before the Old Rollers podcast or anything of you doing some of your strength and conditioning. And I was really impressed back then, and I just thought, this guy's awesome. And so I'm super excited to get the chance to chat with you. I didn't even know you were a jiu-jitsu guy. That was just like strength and conditioning stuff. And then to find out that you're also one of my jiu-jitsu brothers is just super cool.
Yeah, it's great. I really have enjoyed getting involved. I started in February of 2013, and I guess just like everybody else, the first 3 or 4 months I thought I was going to die. The stories I could tell are endless. I had been active my whole life. I actually was a physical education teacher and a health education teacher when I graduated from college. And in college, I was fortunate. I played football in high school and in college. And I started lifting weights just after I turned 13. It was just after, I don't know, you're probably too young, but before Arnold played Hercules, it was a guy named Steve Reeves.
Oh, I know who Steve Reeves is.
Steve Reeves. And I was about 12 years old watching Steve. And I noticed that Steve got all the nice looking ladies. And I said, that's it, man. I'm starting to lift weights. So just after for the Christmas after my 13th birthday, I turned 13 in November. That December, I got a set of 110-pound weights and started working out.
Is that the old plastic ones?
No, I got the metal ones. There was a guy on television named Dan Lurie. He used to have this, what they call a SEAL Test Strongman show. And he was on there. He had it in Brooklyn, New York. He had a barbell manufacturing company. And I got a 110-pound set from him. And I remember working out so much as a kid, right after I got it, that doing sit-ups and stuff, I burned a hole in my mother's rug, from my butt.
You're my kind of guy.
Yeah. And then I played football in high school. And in college, I got involved in the hammer throw. I played football, but I also got involved in the hammer throw. I was fortunate to be a 2-time All-American in college in the hammer throw. I came in second in the small college division.
That's amazing.
And then afterwards, of course, I was always lifting weights. And afterwards, I was teaching and eventually moved on into powerlifting and was nationally ranked at one of the Metropolitan Championships and stuff. I was lifting at the 90 kilogram class, 198, what I am now. And
I tried to lift at 165. I wound up lifting at 181 with a really bad weight cut that didn't go well. So I don't talk much about my one powerlifting meet. I definitely was not nationally ranked. I was pretty much the opposite. But I did.
I had deadlifted, I eventually left powerlifting because I for a few reasons, but one of the main reasons was the really rampant steroid abuse that started. And I was always natural. I was teaching at the time, and I said, I really can't teach these young kids that they should be leading a good lifestyle and drug-free and everything. At the same time, be taking the steroids. It just, it just, it didn't work for me. So I wound up, I hit a 650 squat, 640 deadlift. I was getting up there on the bench and stuff, but
That's legit.
I just decided to move on. Eventually I moved on, and I actually went into law school. I went to law school at night while I was teaching. And then when I got out, all during law school, I had problems with just sitting still, studying for hours. So I'd get up and run or do something just to burn off some energy. In the meantime, along the way, I had taken different forms of karate or kung fu a couple of times. Each time, I just didn't feel the right satisfaction, if you know what I mean. I just didn't say, I'm not sure this is really legit, So, because there was a lot of katas and things like that. And I said, I'll explain how I got into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Along the way, in my 50s, I started to touch base again in weightlifting. I won a Masters North American drug-free championship in the bench press and deadlift. And then, I got to where, while I was a lawyer, I was doing some karate again. Not really happy that much with that. And then started to do, in my early 60s, some Kung Fu, Wing Chun. And one day we had what they call an anti-grappling techniques. And I said, you know what, they were showing this. And I had done enough wrestling and stuff in college. When they showed it, I said, you know what, if this ever went down, this is not, there's no way this is going to work. Somebody who's a halfway decent wrestler is going to just, really put it to you. So I then, started to go look into BJJ, and I wound up, I was working in Midtown Manhattan at the time, and the closest school to me was Vitor Shaolin, Ibero's school. It's a couple blocks away. And I just walked in there one day and, started taking lessons.
That's super cool. I too did powerlifting before jiu-jitsu, and a lot of the people that I've interviewed have some background in powerlifting. And I'm starting to think that maybe the objectivity of powerlifting, you either did or did not lift the weight. Someone whose mind is attracted to that objectivity and measurability may also be attracted to the immediate feedback loop that is jiu-jitsu, because anything that you try, it's very clear whether it worked or it didn't, and what you got to do. And so I feel, this is just speculation, but I feel that there is some parallel in the mentality that seeks that objective truth, because I keep running into people who jiu-jitsu and powerlifting were things that they both sought out, and both are kind of, jiu-jitsu less so now, but certainly powerlifting, kind of oddball hobbies. Not a lot of people are attracted to it. It's kind of gritty and kind of gruff, and not a lot of people look at that and think, that's something I want to do. So I'm my intuition is that there is some parallel there. I haven't quite nailed down what it is yet.
Well, I think just powerlifters and BJJ folks are outliers. we're kind of exceptions. We're not going to be satisfied by going out and playing golf and doing other things. We need something different. And that's the way our mentality works.
I think something else, just like when you said we're outliers, for both sports, you have to be willing to endure a certain amount of suffering. Powerlifting, even if you're doing it as gracefully as possible, you're going to be sore a lot. So
yeah, I remember after one meet, I think squatting, I hit a max squat, and I woke up the next morning and the blood vessels in my eyes were blown.
Totally. Yeah, that's a very common experience. Like you're just starting to get good when that happens. Oh, that's awesome. So let's talk about those early days. you step in at Shaolin's academy, and you're a 65-year-old attorney who does some weightlifting fairly strong. What were those early days like for some of my we'll say once again seasoned starting out athletes?
Well, I felt like I was going to die. I mean, it was very hard. I mean, stories are. I remember I was in maybe about 3 or 4 months training, and Shaolin really. I mean, he was concerned, but he didn't show me any quarter. Basically thrown into the pond. And survival of the fittest. So I've never rolled with anyone as old or older than me. I've always rolled with people generally that are much, much younger than I am. This one particular day, he had me, and he would match you up with people. And he matched me up with this young gentleman who was about, I'm about 5'8" on a good day, I guess. And
yeah, me too.
I shrunk. I actually, when you get older, you'll I was at one time 5'9" '3/4, but last time I measured myself, it says either gravity got stronger or something happened. I don't know.
You're not helping me out here. I gotta hang on to every half inch I got.
But this fellow was I'd say 6'4" to 6'5". He was in his early 30s and probably about a good 50 pounds heavier than I was. So it was, oh my God. So we were going, and then the fellow passed me. But had me in side control, and I held him off. I didn't let him mount or anything else, but I have to tell you that last 2.5 or 3 minutes was the longest of my life. And so I said, okay, boy, am I glad that's over with. So I had a couple of more rolls, and then Shaolin says, well, I want you to go with him again. I said, oh no. That's just the way it is. I suddenly learned the value of setting up a frame.
yeah, I can see that.
And then there was the early days. I remember there was a young fellow I was rolling with. He was 22. He was my size and height, weight. And he was 22, and he was a personal trainer. He's one of these guys that looks like they're cut from stone.
Yeah.
I was 65 at the time, and we had a 6-minute roll, I think. And he passed me and submitted me 5 times in 6 minutes with the same submission, and I didn't know what the hell was going on.
Been there.
I got up and I said, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I'm getting killed here. So I thought about it that night. I'm kind of stubborn. I said, I'm gonna. So what I determined was I was allowing him to play open guard, and when he played open guard, there's no way I could keep the speed up with him. He was just too fast for me. And maybe when I was 20 years old, but not anymore. So what I determined was if I held his gi, everyone had told me, I guess from the powerlifting and everything, and throwing the hammer all those thousands and thousands of times. I also threw the 58 and 35 and 56 pound weight when I was younger. And my grips were and still are very, very strong. So once I got hold of his gi, there was no more running. You control him and slow him down. And that was when light bulbs started to go off in my head. I said, I have to make them play my game, not allow them to play their game. Certainly when they're 40 years younger than me. I'm just no way. You can say what you want, you can think what you want, but there's no way at 65 you're as fast as you are when you're at 22. Just not happening.
No question.
I mean, that was a learning experience. So the first few years, it took me to find it, kind of the ropes. I was training probably 4 or 5 times a week. And, rolling, we would have the warm up, and then we'd have like normal classes. They'd show some kind of a move, a technique. You'd practice that for about 10 or 15 minutes. Then it was all out, and the rolls were no joke. I mean, we would have them, they would be up to sometimes 15 minutes long. And you were going, and at all levels. So I was rolling with brown belts and black, it was a really good experience. But yeah, I also learned there are different people that react differently
Mm-hmm.
when you roll with them. You need to choose who you're going to roll with. You know, I remember rolling with one fellow who was a blue belt, young guy, nice guy, but I was trying to put me into an arm bar, and I was resisting the arm bar, and he just yanked on that
Yeah.
like unbelievable. And I thought, you know, my elbow was going to go. So, oh no, I just was, you know, I had to let you go. Your grip was, well, you know, this isn't combat here, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I have to go to work. But anyway, you know, you eventually, you know, have those things. I remember the first time, frankly, I was rolling with a blue belt, and my legs are strong, obviously, and I got him in a triangle, and I kept saying, why isn't he tapping? I mean, the triangle's strong. Why isn't he tapping? I suddenly looked up, and his eyes were rolled in the back of his head, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you realize the power of that jiu-jitsu has when you have that kind of a situation. You know?
You know, it's funny that you were talking about getting submitted multiple times in a round with the same thing. You know, at 65. Well, I started at 35, and I had a partner who he just has a phenomenal guillotine. Like it's just like wherever you are, if you're within, you know, that bent arm's length of his body, you're in the guillotine zone. And I can remember getting guillotined in a 5-minute round probably 10 times. I mean, it was just that fast. And same thing as you, I drove home and I was like, oh man, maybe this ain't for me. And so I was lucky I had a really good friend who was a brown belt. And I said, you know, what am I doing wrong here? Is there a way I can fix this? And he said, well, the first thing is that, you know, our friend has a really good, really natural ability to get that guillotine. So even if you do everything right, you're probably going to eat a few. But the thing that you're doing that's making it so easy is that you aren't managing the distance. With someone, if jiu-jitsu, a lot of it is about distance control. You either have to be far away or all the way inside. And you're staying in that sort of mid zone where, you know, he can wrap that arm around your neck and, you know, just move his body to position the guillotine. And so just that one, same as you, like I had to make a change. And when I did, it went from 10 times in a round to like 4 times in a round, which still sucked, but it was a lot better than 10. So don't feel bad that you were getting nailed at 65, because I was getting it at 35 and probably worse.
Well, you know, I thought about it and worked it through, but I have to say, you know, I'm still training and this fellow's not. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you just have to, there's a lot more to this art and sport than mere physical ability. I mean, you really need to think through, reason what's working for you and what's not working for you, you know, and realize that most classes in a BJJ school, they're geared for people that are in the 20 to 35 range. When you are, you know, over that, when you're 50 and up, many of those moves are not going to be available to you because you frankly can't get in those positions anymore. When you try, you just, in some cases, don't have the speed to do it anymore. Someone will be younger will be able to defend it, and you'll think you're doing something wrong, but you're not. You're doing what they're showing you. You just can't do it that fast anymore. So you have to modify some of your techniques, and you need to have a coach that understands that and realizes that and is willing to work with you. Alex Eklund, for instance, helped me very much with his partner, Van Allen Flores. Brown belts when I started, and they would take the time to help me. Another fellow who's been very instrumental in coaching me is Pedro Mink Baumfeld. He's won a tremendous amount of competitions around the country, and for 3 years he's been coaching me and helping me out, you know, developing a game that works for me.
Yeah. So what are some of the game plan choices that you've made? I know based on what you said about your grips, just from all the training that you had done previous to jiu-jitsu, you have a pretty strong grip. So you built a game, like a grip-based game. What are some of the other things to accommodate maybe the lack of speed, some of the tactical choices that you're making?
Well, I learned early on that I had a very strong close guard, in the sense that once I put the close guard on, it was very hard for someone to open. Not that you want to sit in close guard forever, although I've tried that. And sometimes in a row, I'll just put somebody in close guard and I'll keep them there for 5 minutes until I decide to, and that pisses them off. Very much, but I'll do it as a training exercise, just to see, as one of my conditioning exercises that I'll do is I'll hang off a heavy bag with my legs clamped and just hang there for minutes at a time, timing myself so that I am prepared if someone stands up and they try to open the close guard that way. Obviously they're going to try to push down on your legs with their elbows and everything else. But if they do that and you clamp onto the back of their head, not their neck, but the back of their head, because you get better leverage, move your legs up on top of them around their shoulders, suddenly it gets very heavy for them to try to push their elbows on your knees. So I started that with the close guard. Shaolin said, look, you have a really strong close guard. You might want to start working with that. What I also discovered is because of my grips, I started experimenting with Lasso Guard. And I found that I could have a lot of success with Lasso Guard. I was giving black belts trouble, when I was a blue belt and a young purple belt with the Lasso Guard. Since then, I've moved on and added lapel guard that I like. I've used spider guard sometimes. Sometimes I'll combine the lapel guard with the lasso guard. I work sweeps off of. If they've got to choose a side. If they go to one side, I've got the lapel guard. If they go to the other side, I've got the lasso guard. One way or the other. Instead of just doing, I took lessons with Marcus Tinoco over at Marcelo Garcia's. And he's one of the best lasso guard players in the world, really. And he was showing me some techniques I had never seen before. And I found them to be very effective. So that's kind of, I kind of look at what works for me and what I can, for one of the things I noticed is a lot of people work on their grips. They'll use grippers or they'll use some, heavy dumbbells or whatever, but not too many people work on their hooks. I started using bands to exercise my hooks. I would attach a hook to a band to a power rack, and then sit back, have that around the end of my foot, and then just flex that foot up and back to exercise the hook. And just to see how it was working one time, and I think I posted a video of this, I got on the power rack and hung from the top of the power rack with just my hooks.
I saw this video. This was insane.
Because I wanted to see how that would, if it was being effective, and thank goodness it was. So, that's what I'm always looking for things, realizing that once you come to that understanding that what you're learning in class is really not geared to someone your age, and you need to take the time to talk to the professor about some of the issues that you're having, and is there a way you can change the technique in certain ways, not to diminish its effectiveness overall, but to let you get to the position that you need to get to easier. As an example, in the lasso guard, a lot of people, they do a kind of a berimbolo underneath it, and they wound up with an omoplata or a but I could never get my shoulders fast enough under there. And what had happened is I'd wind up getting squashed because underneath I'm holding the lasso and the guy's right on top of me. I don't like doing this. I changed the method that I used it, but I was working with Pedro a couple of months ago, and I said, I'd really like to be able to do this. I think it would give me a good variation. So what we discovered is if I hold the same side lapel as I'm holding the sleeve of the lapel, so I like to lasso with my left hand. So okay. I'm holding my opponent's right sleeve. If I cross collar grab him with his right sleeve with my right hand, in other words, because he's facing me, I can then spin down on my shoulders and go up again and hit hit the omoplata and or the triangle, depending on which one I want to use. Triangle I always prefer. It's always better to get your legs around them than have the omoplata. But yeah, I mean, you need to look at things differently and realize that a lot of people are teaching techniques that aren't going to be effective for you because you're not in that place anymore. You're in a different place. It doesn't mean you can't do the BJJ. What it means is you have to use your head, think of what you can do to alter the technique to get it to be working for you. You know?
Well, and what you just said there too, you're taking advantage of your grip strength by using the lapel to execute a technique that others might use an attribute of speed or, like rotational speed. You're not able to do it quickly, but if you keep them, in position with that grip on the lapel, then you don't have to be quick anymore because they're not going anywhere. So
that's exactly right. And it's something that a lot of people are not used to because they haven't seen it before. But, we all have strengths and weaknesses. And as you age, it's going to change. Things change. You have to constantly be thinking, what can I do to get a positive out of a negative here? What am I going to do? How can I change this particular technique so that it's going to work for me? Because we may have short legs. We may, triangles may be a problem for us. Our arms may be, we have our grips may be problematic in some way. But there's always something for somebody if you think enough about it. Maybe you need to play a deep half guard game. Maybe there's a different type of game that will work better for you. One of the big things that people don't focus on, what I focused on when I was beginning and I learned, was escaping. Because as an older grappler, you're going to be put in positions sometimes that, wow, this is not good. I got to get out of here. I can't stay here too long because I can't breathe and I'm getting claustrophobic and I got everything else going. So, focusing on escapes, there was just to give a bit of a plug, there was a guy who has a website, MMA Leech.
Gustavo Gasparini.
Gustavo Gasparini, yeah, he's a friend of mine. He has a great program called the Ace of Escapes. It's pretty cheap, it's about $40 or something. And I used that and watched it and watched it and watched it. I still use those escapes all the time when I'm rolling. So it's one of the effective things. And I think a lot of people focus on submissions, but they don't focus on really getting out of potential submissions.
I think I too was very attracted to escapes because I could not figure out how to have a functioning guard for the longest time. So people would just like walk through my guard. It was just, it was at least 2.5, maybe even 3 years before I started to even have a guard that you could call a guard. It was just like, yeah, I got my legs here. Oh, now you're gone. Okay, I'm screwed. And so I became, I gave up on the idea that I would have a good guard at first, and I just started working escapes. And one of the, similar to you, I had an experience with a DVD. It was the Bill Cooper Escapes DVD. And the philosophy of that DVD was that if you were just in a submission, there's a good chance that the guy who had you there is better than you. So your escapes need to be not trying to get back to neutral or to a guard, but coming to a top position or a submission of your own. And so I actually, over time, sort of became dangerous from submissions. Like I would be in a submission hold, and then all of a sudden you would be in one. And that was the very beginnings of me starting to think, okay, maybe I actually could do this. It's like the level of surprise that you could have on somebody who was a lot better than you when you snuck out of a submission and put them in one was enough that I could be, kind of dangerous, but the consequence of that was that my instructor eventually had to tell me, like, bro, you got to start working on your guard, because I'm watching you just purposely let people pass and then stick your arm out so that they'll catch it, and then you can try and do one of your escapes on them, and that's not going to fly. I can't promote you if you don't have any kind of a guard. So when we've talked about the early experience, you've made it through to brown belt, and I love what you said about finding the game that works for you. And then you talked about you got some lessons with people who were kind of experts in the lasso. You're going down the rabbit hole on what you're good at. And that reminds me of a talk that we had with Brian Freeman, who's an adaptive athlete. He had an accident in the Navy, and it gave him I think it's a nearly complete paralysis below his hips. So I think he has some amount of movement of his legs, but it's definitely not what he had before the accident. And he talked about the same thing of initially he was trying to do things in jiu-jitsu that other people were doing, and there was just no chance that it could work, So he started trying to find, well, what are the pieces that I have and what can I do with them? And then how can I build a game around that? And so a lot of his game is built around the Kimura trap from bottom side control, because he can do those reversals without, the full use of his legs, because he's leveraging, the strength in his arms, and he's got real, just like freakishly strong arms. He was showing me some pull-up videos and stuff that he's got, and so working, same thing, finding a set of attributes that you can work with, and then going way down the rabbit hole within those attributes to take somebody into deep water in a place that they don't expect. I really like that. I think that's a brilliant problem solving skill.
I think that, there's this misperception that you need to know 1,000 techniques. There was an old line that Bruce Lee is supposed to be credited with, that I fear not the man who knows, who practices 10,000 kicks. I fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times. Basically, I think there's this misperception when you compete and everything, and I've competed a number of times, that you need to know this plethora of techniques, everything from, top, bottom, side, everything. That's not the case. If you look at all of at least I found it not to be the case. And when you look at the techniques that are displayed by some of the top folks, you'll see they generally play one or two guards specifically, each time. They have a number one and a number two, kind of a fallback. And that's where they're at, and you get them, they know how to, they may know 80 different techniques from each one of those guards, but they get you plays first, and they get you playing their game. The big thing is they don't allow you to put them in their game, the other person's game. The person who wins generally in these competitions, number one, 80% of the time, is the person who scores first. And then number two, it's the person who establishes their game. Certainly in the masters level, at my level, the competitions are 5 minutes. When you consider that for most of the time, you're kind of monkeying around for the first minute. People may try takedowns, this and that. Eventually, a lot of old guys try to pull guards. And then you basically have, let's say, 4 minutes to try to establish a game and try to submit somebody. Probably, I'd say 90% of the competition wins are at that level are done via points, because the time level is just not that much time, to establish, get yourself. So, again, you need to get yourself in a position to establish a game and make that other person play your game.
I like what you're saying there, because we were talking earlier about having a scientific approach to assessing your own attributes and trying to work within them. And then you're also effectively having a scientific approach to your competition game planning, where you're saying there's going to be a minute of us feeling each other out, followed by a maximum of 4 minutes where we can work. It's not a lot of time. There's not even probably going to be a lot of points scored. So we got to get the person in our game and get some points on the board. And that's just about going to, that's going to take us 80% of the way there, which is that's a scientific view. That's you're looking at each round in the tournament, not just as a, like, I'm going to go display my jiu-jitsu, but what are the factors of this tournament, and how are they going to affect how my jiu-jitsu is going to play itself out against this other person's?
And you also have to realize that as you age, as you get higher into the master's classes, the highest master's class in IBJJF right now is Master 7, which, by the way, when I started, it was Master 6. And some of the tournaments I entered, there was the Masters class. It was Masters 1, which was 30 to 40, and Masters 2, which was 40 and up. So I was rolling with the guys that were 27 years younger than I was, basically in the competition. I actually wrote to IBJJF and said, look, it'd be a good idea. Judo has classes all the way up into the 80s. I said, why don't you consider doing that? And they wrote back a couple of times, said, no. Then finally they did the Masters 7, because it used to be 55 and up, and now it's 60 and up. But, you really have to, as you age, realize that a lot of things are going to change. You're not going to have as many competitors, frankly, because as people age, they tend to drop out. And once that happens, each match becomes very important. Not that they're not anyway, but, because it's a single elimination, but, you may only have 1 or 2 competitors. And, you wind up winning 2 matches and all of a sudden you're the champion. But not that it's easy, because the people that are older that are still doing this, they're committed. I mean, they are working out a lot, and they want that championship.
So that kind of brings me to the one of the second thing that I wanted to explore is some of your strength and conditioning, because, like I said, the first knowledge that I had of you was a strength and conditioning video, and I was like, man, that's pretty awesome. But since I've gotten to know you as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, I've kind of followed you and checked out your some of your strength and conditioning workouts, and you have some very creative ideas of strength and conditioning just for the jiu-jitsu athlete. And that's not like for the older jiu-jitsu athletes, it's for everybody. So I wanted you to kind of talk about how you created some of the workouts that you do, and some of the benefit that you've seen from it. Well,
I kind of sit back and think, because I've been training now almost 60 years. I started lifting weights when I was 13 years old, and I'm 72 now. And I along the way, I read countless strength and health magazines and muscular development magazines, and been to different powerlifting meets and competed and so forth and so on. And with the physical education background and physiology of exercise, and you're basically looking at something and saying, well, this might work. Why don't we try this? For instance, as I said, with the closed guard, I never saw any exercises that were specific to strengthening the closed guard. So I said, well, I think if I hang a heavy bag off of a power rack, the chinning bar that's usually on the top of a power rack.
Yeah.
I wrap my legs around that, and I see how long, and I time myself, and I do it for sets. I think that will strengthen my closed guard. And then what I said, okay, I did this. Now I'll use a kettlebell, and I'll hold a kettlebell while I'm adding weight to the equation. Then I was doing a lot of different abdominal exercises, core exercises, and I said, I really like to get something that when I'm holding someone in closed guard, and they stand up, that I can make sure I can sit up and get my hands around their neck. And break them down. So I started doing sit-ups while in the closed guard position on a heavy bag, and doing them. And then I added a kettlebell to that. And that was some of the things. Then I said, I think a neck is a very, very strong neck is a very good attribute here, because if your neck is weakened, you can really get injury. And also, I noticed that a lot of times, frankly, I was able to use my neck as like a third arm. When I'm balancing on top of somebody or something like that, I could kind of bridge out on almost like a front bridge on with my neck.
Yep.
So what I started to do was I would basically put my head on a bench and my feet on a chair, and I would just lift myself off the ground for time and stay in that position, in a full body extension that way. Then I started to, I said, well, yeah, I can do that. Then I took some dumbbells and I started doing dumbbell bench presses from that position.
Oh, you're a
Then I
madman.
turned
I
around.
love that.
I turned around and I said, well, gee, I can do it the other way too. I'll put my front of my head on the bench. And then I started doing rows, dumbbell rows, and straight, not only, because I'm always looking for things that are efficient. We don't have much time. We work. So I said, I can knock off my stomach muscles because I'm holding myself that way. I can knock off my neck muscles because I hold myself that way. And I also can, work my lats and back by doing the same thing. It's almost like a total body workout. So I used that and did that for a number of times. And, I'd come up with different things, for instance, there was the power wheel where you roll the thing out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I always was able to roll the thing out, standing up from the same position, go all the way out and go all the way back. So
that's actually my goal. So I have my goal for the end of summer is to be able to do a standing ab wheel.
Yeah, I've been able to do that for a long time. So let me try something. So that I took a power wheel and I combined two of them so that I had two wheels that I could lash my feet to in the back and have a single power wheel in the front. That way I could do V's. I would basically go out and come up into a V, go out, come up into a V, using my feet and the front power wheel and the two on the back. So I said that works pretty well. I like that. And I've tried different things. I'm really into strength endurance. I used to like to do a lot of hill running, but I noticed as I've gotten older that my knees do not like to do a lot of hill running anymore. So
yeah,
what I've done is, I just did a workout like this about a month ago. I put 150 pounds into a wheelbarrow. I have a very, very steep hill down at towards the end of my road because my road ends in a reservoir. So I rolled the 275-pound dumbbells in the wheelbarrow down about a quarter of a mile to the hill and then rolled it up. That was very close to death. I mean, I got back to the house and I said, I don't know if I ever want to do this again. I always I try to come up with things that are challenging that I can see. All of us have been in a situation where we are on the bottom of someone trying to smash us in BJJ. And we're saying, I don't know if I can, I just don't know if I can hold this guy off anymore, And you want to be able to just tap that little bit of reserve, that 15 seconds that you need to hold that guy off and maybe create a little space so you can get an arm or a leg in there, and that's what I try to do, to try to push myself to be able to do that. Put myself while I'm not in BJJ, rolling on the mats in positions that are similar to the types of feelings that we get and get there. And also, frankly, as you get older, you need to spend a lot more time conditioning flexibility, strength, mobility, endurance off the mats so that you have the ability to compete on the mats. May be able to get away with not doing so much of that when you're 25. Once you get into your 50s, it's a whole new ballgame. Your body is changing. You get tired. It takes longer for you to recuperate. And you need to condition your body to be able to take the kind of abuse, frankly, it's going to take in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
What you just said there reminded me of an interview that we did with a physical therapist. Why is his name escaping me? Dr. James Escaloni. And he is also a jiu-jitsu purple belt and very, very much a strength and conditioning athlete as well. And he was saying that he suffered a very slight little injury, like a rib injury in a half guard position, kind of like a dogfight position. And it occurred while he was sort of twisting and trying to find his opponent's, far wrist, and also trying to drive them over. And he's a good wrestler. So, he was sort of wrestling, but from maybe a disadvantageous position. And he said that what he realized was that the injury came because his body is not strong in that positioning, because he's never really asked his body to be in that position. And so he started doing some Bulgarian bag workouts with that rotation in that plane that he was rotating, in that wrestling exchange. And, he was doing that as part of his rehab for the injury, but he's kept that in because if, he finds himself in that position again, he doesn't want to not be able to take advantage of what was an instinctual movement. It's just that his body at that particular time wasn't ready for it. And what you've talked about sounds to me like you're tempering your body in a similar way to what he was talking about, and making it ready for the challenges that it's going to face, so that, when you have a live resisting opponent, your body's not like, what the hell is this? You're
right. I mean, I try to challenge myself in different ways, and not only on the mats or with conditioning, but even with, for instance, diet. I follow an intermittent fasting approach, and have for a very long time. I got involved in that probably when I was in my early to mid 50s. There was a book written by a fellow by the name of Ori Hofmeckler, and he wrote The Warrior Diet. Ori Hofmeckler was a special forces Israeli guy, and the way he explained it is, in the early kind of, let's say, caveman days, we didn't sit and have 3 meals a day. People, and they hunted. They would come to a kill or something, and they would have a big meal at night. I mean, that was it, and then the next day they get up and do the same thing again. And then I looked at some of the benefits that he had. And if you see this guy, he's now in his 60s, I think. He was in his 50s, and he looked like he was really made of stone. He just hammered, And one of the things was it was a natural increase of testosterone during that fasting period and everything. So that sounds pretty good, So I started using it, and eventually I evolved into a little bit more stricter, where I try to only have a 4-hour eating window per day, where I'll eat from 4 to 8, 4 in the afternoon to 8 in the evening. And I thought when I first started that, wow, because you always hear breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and how am I going to be able to work out? But I find that I'm just hungry, and I don't mean that in the physical sense, but I'm sharp, I'm alert. When I'm rolling, I'm alert, I just have, I don't feel overloaded in any way. I feel fast. And so I challenge myself to, I think the secret to longevity in a lot of sports and activities is discipline. You need to discipline yourself. If you allow yourself to give in to certain things, you wind up, not doing as well as you could.
What you just said there about that feeling of sharpness. I played guitar for, about 30 years. I played from when I was very young, and I think I got my first guitar when I was 10 or 12. And in my opinion, the best guitarist that's ever lived, and who cares about my opinion, right? But there's a guy named Steve Vai. And he says that when he plays concerts, he never eats the day of a concert until it's over, because there's a certain amount of acuity and crispness in his connection between his brain and his hand when he's improvising, that if he eats, that goes away, and he winds up playing what he calls like canned licks, where he's just playing things that he's practiced, but if he hasn't eaten, it somehow frees his brain and the connection where his hand can improvise instantaneously with his brain, and he can play directly what he's hearing in his head as he's hearing it, which he can't do if he's eating.
Yeah, I agree. I found that too. I found that when I'm rolling and on an empty stomach, or I just feel better. I feel better.
That's fascinating to me. I think I know a lot of people who have like a 2-hour limit before class, where they won't eat because they're worried that they'll chuck it. So you're just extending that to the whole day, which, is it's not that much worse. I've rolled fasted and I've rolled with food. I didn't find that much of a performance increase from the food. I certainly didn't find a decrease from not eating. So I haven't done intermittent fasting that much, but when I have, I didn't really find any performance loss.
I know Tom DeBlas follows an intermittent fasting regime. I don't know whether it's as long. Mine is usually around 20 hours. But, I think you need to find what works for you. And that's what I've found through experimentation. It works for me.
Yeah. And that flows right with the concept of finding what works for you on the mat too. Go keep experimenting, find something that triggers for you, and then stick with it. Don't move on once you found the thing that is good.
You always have to keep an open mind. All of our games are going to evolve, our lives are going to evolve, our bodies are going to change over time. Also, we have certain time constraints on us, with your training. How you say, well, gee, how am I going to, watch my diet, train jiu-jitsu, train strength, train flexibility, hit the endurance and everything else that I need. I'm a family man or whatever. I've got a job, I've got responsibilities. How the hell am I supposed to do all these things? And I think you need to think creatively about how you, as an example, I probably have about 3,000 pounds of weights at home, all kinds of dumbbells up to 120 pounds but it takes a lot of time to set all this stuff up and everything, So I said, I really need to find something that is BJJ specific that I can limit my time on. And I found, I just ordered it recently. It's an old time strength, one of those chest crushers, old time, but you can use it in different positions. And I said, damn, this thing works. It works pretty well. I got up the next day. I said, I feel like somebody beat me up, and you can find these things. You can get a total kind of upper body workout if you do it right in like 20 minutes. And you don't have to change this dumbbell, change weights, put this barbell on, move the bench, a lot of other stuff. You can all get, and even squatting. I don't do much squatting per se anymore, although I have front squat equipment and other stuff, but I'll work on pistols and different things like that, to strengthen. Instead of doing standard deadlifts now, I will do a lot of hex bar deadlifts. Because I think they use a lot of leg strength when you're using it. So you're in a different position, less on the back and more on the legs, which is what I want to get right now. And I use it for different ways. I mean, a few months ago, I wanted to see endurance where I was, so I did 300 for 30 reps and a hex bar, deadlift. I think I weighed 165 at the time. Just, after you start sucking some serious wind after you get up to 20. So.
Yeah.
And I work on endurance. I try to be efficient. I have an air bike. I have an air rower. I use vertical sliding, like a skate thing. And I just, I'm getting next week, getting one of those Maxa climbers, the vertical climbers.
I love the Versa climber. Yeah, that's a tool.
Versa climber I couldn't afford. Versa climber is like $3,000. I said, no. Maxa climber is 400. That's enough.
I saw one on the Facebook market that was like 100, and I almost bought it, but I'm on the verge of like having an employment problem in October.
Sure.
And so I thought, if I go get this, my wife's going to be really pissed at me. So I better just stick.
You mentioned something very, very important in all of this business. You need to have a spouse and a family that are going to be very supportive, because you're going to get that statement sooner or later where your wife comes to you and says, you'd rather spend time on the mat sweating with those guys than me, and you need to have an answer for that.
Well, see, at this point in our marriage, my wife was like, hey, go be with those sweaty guys. Yeah, she just, I think, given our current potential economic troubles, would not take kindly to me spending on anything unnecessary.
Oh,
But
sure.
I do love the climber. Um, Another thing that you mentioned there when we were talking about some of the strength training and stuff is you try to do things for power endurance, and that has been the biggest challenge for me. I seem to be able to, like, maximal strength I can gain fairly quickly, and I also can do long slow cardio, at a pretty high clip pretty readily. But the stuff in the middle, like, say, sprint intervals or Tabatas, or something like that, where I've got to sprint, or do something maximal and then recover quickly from it. I have a lot of trouble with that. So um, I'm going to be following you some more to learn some of your ways to build that power endurance.
But I strengthen just what I try and do. For instance, I give you a workout. Basically, yeah, when you do kettlebell swings, up and down, you're basically swinging up, and the kettlebell gravity takes it and swings it down. So combine that with sledgehammer hits on a tire, and then in between that, use the rollout wheel for 10 reps. And you just, when you do strength endurance, what the secret to the whole thing is not to stay on the same thing too long. So basically, you could do it anywhere. You could do, like, as I said, 10 kettlebell or 20 kettlebell swings, 20 sledgehammer hits, 10 of the rollouts back. Then you do 20 kettlebell swing, and just rotating them all the time. And you do, let's say you go through about 6 sets of that, you're going to be sucking some serious wind and breaking a real sweat. But the muscles that you're using in many cases are different muscles.
Mm-hmm.
In the kettlebell, you're forcing the swing up and letting gravity take over. On with the sledgehammer, you're forcing the swing down, as opposed to the kettlebell. And then you're hitting your core really strongly when you do the rollouts. So you want to vary those things so that you affect different muscle groups, but cardiovascularly, you still keep going.
That makes a lot of sense. I'll be putting that to use this summer. So I think we've covered a lot of the stuff that I wanted to get to. I actually just discovered your Facebook group, the 50 and Up BJJ. Talk a little bit about what the impetus for creating that was.
Well, I noticed that there were a lot more older people that I would go to a meet or something, and people would question me. And I remember I was at a meet, and there was a gentleman who was probably in his 50s, and he was sitting with his wife. And after I had the competition, the meet was over. I think it happened to be a meet that I was fortunate and won. It was the New York Open, and he congratulated me, and he said, "How old are you?" And his wife said, I told him, I don't know, I was like 68 or something at the time, 67. And so she hit him in the side with an elbow. She said, "See, you could be doing this. You're only 52 or something like that." And others, people would ask me different things, and people would say, when did you get started? How did you get started? Why did you get started? And I said, I think there's groups for 40 and up. I know there's a 40 plus BJJ group. And, there's another one called Old Guys Roll, I think. But there isn't anything geared for somebody who's more senior. And so I started the group, and now I think I have members on 6 continents. I mean, people from Australia, from Asia, from Europe, from South America, just all over. Every, day or more than several times a week, I'll get somebody new who's heard about the group or wants to join, and posting, different things. So yeah, it's been really great. And the thought is that we're going to have, we had one seminar that was geared for older folks already. I want to have more of those when this situation ends. I've got a lot of people who are asking me about it and when it's going to happen. Kind of in connection with this, I started this program called Never Too Old BJJ. We offer sweatshirts and T-shirts, and hopefully thinking about maybe even getting some competitions going and stuff that are geared for folks that are maybe 50 and up, you know. Right now, the IBJJF has the master's program starts at 30. Well, a 30-year-old guy is kind of in his prime, you know. I'm not sure he qualifies as a master, but you know, them they do. I think once you hit 50 and up, you're talking about the real deal, you know.
Yeah, I hear you on that. The group is something that I think just from my membership in like the Blue Belt Mafia, which we're actually going to have Luis on the show to talk to him. Being able to be part of a community where like it's like kind of a no trolling allowed, you know, like there's maybe some light, you know, tomfoolery, but nothing where people are really picking on each other too hard. I've actually gotten a lot of good information and you know, help with issues. I've seen people ask questions about stuff and been able to help from my experience too. And so that the group that you started, the 50 and up BJJ, I'm sure it serves the same purpose. I'm going to submit a request to join, even though I'm nowhere near 50, only because I would like to be a part of the group so that I can also find other people that may be good interviews for the show, because that's a group that I do think is underserved, and it would give me the chance to connect with them.
That'd be great. I mean, we have people in there that are on. Alex Eklund is in the group. You know, I have people that are in it. You know, I approve everyone who gets in the group, specifically because I'm not really high functioning on social media. There are more than I do. But I do know when I belong to other groups, 40 plus, as I said, and old guys. And I've seen some very bad things, unfortunately, posted on those. And I just really, I want to keep the group geared and focused on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and, you know, training and conditioning for that purpose. I'm certainly not a politician. I'm a tax lawyer. I represent people against, but I certainly don't know, want to focus rather on that kind of stuff.
Also, you don't want to tell me who to vote for? Like what?
Absolutely not.
Well, Tom, your insight and your experience has just been extremely instructive. I've gotten a lot of great ideas. I'm going to put to work some of the strength endurance workouts that you just suggested, because that's really my weakness. I have enough power that I can go with a lot of younger guys, but my power recovery is not as fast as I would like. So I'm gonna try and up my game on that, inspired by you. If somebody wants to learn more about you, how could they reach out to someone like yourself who's maybe not as savvy with the social media or as active?
Well, they can always message me through. I mean, I'm very open to messages, even if you're not friendly with me on Facebook. You can reach me in there, or you can text me. I'm happy to give it, and you know, if you give me any bad stuff, I've got a couple of guys that will be visiting you very shortly. And you know, if
you don't want naughty pictures?
No. Funny story. All of a sudden, an old friend of mine sent me a message, and it was exactly that, a naughty picture. And all of a sudden, he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, this was a mistake."
I apologize.
You meant to send it to someone else. The other thing is to, if I could, there's two basic rules I think we need to follow. At least I try to follow my whole life, and that's just one. I don't let other people put limitations on me. Mm-hmm. You will find that, you know, especially as you get older, people will question you as to why. I had someone ask me, why do I feel it's necessary to roll? I was 67 or 68 at the time, to roll and fight with these younger people. And my answer was kind of like, because I can. And so people will look at you strange, realizing that you're an outlier, you know, that you're doing something that maybe makes them feel guilty that they're not doing more. and have given up. And two is I don't put limitations on myself. You know, I don't. All of us have moments where we say, should we be doing this? Is this something I'm capable of doing anymore? And my answer to that is push forward, move forward. You know, going backward never helped anybody. Push, try what you're gonna try. It may not be successful at first, but you stay in there and you keep plugging away, and you get your butt kicked numerous times. Sooner or later, you're going to find a way where you're going to be the kicker and not the kickee.
Oh, that's so true. And even with the physical challenges, you know, just like what you said with the throwing the dumbbells in the wheelbarrow, you know, that's a butt kicker. But it's a joy to be able to express that with you know, the human body. Like that's an expression of life. And you know, there's probably a lot of people who, you know, wish that their body would allow them to do that. And so I think as long as we can, it's almost our responsibility to take advantage of it and to suffer well in the name of you know, taking advantage of what the body gives us.
I mean, yeah, when we're older and we can still do this, I mean, obviously we pay a price, but it's a gift. We've been given a gift, and we have an obligation to use the gift as best we can. Many of the people that I started with, I went to college with, they're no longer with us, you know, or they're in a mental state where they can't function properly. I think we have to just, you know, take every day and be thankful for the gift and use it as best we can.
Yeah, I mean, just like what you said, you're going to get your butt kicked a lot on the mats, but better to be getting your butt kicked than, you know, to be on the couch. It's just, you kicked everybody's butt that was on the couch that day.
If I could give one thing, I'd give a shout out to, and I've done a lot of great training there, is the Bronx Jiu-Jitsu with Junior Ortega and Nate Ortega. Great guys. And when this pandemic is over in the Bronx, I'm going to be down there again.
Yeah, I can't wait to get back to training myself. This medical situation has really taught me how much I really miss and love jiu-jitsu. I don't know that I can definitely say I appreciated it, but I didn't realize how deeply it affected me until a couple of weeks after the shutdown. I started getting really weird and kind of pissy with my kids and not myself. And so I had to make some changes. I had to start working out a lot harder and a lot more during the day to just burn off the sort of anxious energy that I got from losing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality of it is many of us are fairly aggressive people. And we need to have that channeling to burn that steam off so that we can come down to a normal vibe. And, you know, trust me, my wife tells me when I need it taken care of.
that makes perfect sense. Well, Tom, I can't thank you enough for your time and your insight. This has just been a real pleasure. I'm super thrilled we got to do it, and I want you to commit to coming back because there's some more things that we want to learn from you. But for now, I think we should pause.
I thank you for having me. It's been a great experience, and I'd be really happy to come back and talk to you again.
Fantastic.